Good morning, everyone, and I hope you had a great Thanksgiving and fall break. Our last topic is Chapter 13 in our Photoshop book, which is on output for print and web. And we're going to just start by looking at a print dialog, which is going to be different depending on if you're at home or at school, what kind of a printer you're hooked up to. But let's open Navy Girl from the Chapter 13 files, and I'm just going to show you the options that I have at my home and how it looks here. So it may be a little bit different. To get to the print dialog, Command P is the shortcut. You know, you can always come to the file menu, excuse me, and we're just going to look at some of the options we have right here in the printer setup. Now again, this is going to a desktop printer, so I'm going to just move this over, and your available printers would be up here. So the Canon is the one that I currently have hooked up at home. We have how many copies you can make, the layout, whether it be tall or wide, and it gives you a preview of that. And then we have some other things like color management and print settings. So if we click on this print settings button right here, we're taken to the printer driver software. So any printer specific settings that we need to do would be here. So this is specific to my Canon. And if it doesn't, okay, so this is specific to this. We have default settings, some presets that we may have available to us. And in the show details, we can change our letter size. So maybe I'm printing on 4x6 or 8x10 photo paper, and I want to change some of the details here. So within here, we have lots of different options also. So color matching, we have paper handling, if there's a cover page, the quality and the media that you're using. And again, this is specific to your printer. So I can see that I maybe with this Canon would use some photo papers. So maybe I'm using a glossy 2. This is where I would target that. So the way the papers behave is very specific. And if you are using different paper, like photo paper, matte, glossy, whatever, you would want to change there. So I'm just going to cancel out of this dialog completely. Another topic that we have, and you might need to twirl it open, is the color management. This lets you determine how the colors in your image are put onto paper, how the ink actually goes on the paper. So we know RGB and CMYK are a little bit different, and depending on what printer you're printing to, it might not even use CMYK inks. This Canon that I have here at home does use actually 5 inks. It has cyan, magenta, yellow, black, and rich black. So at any rate, we usually need to transfer the RGB color space to whatever your particular printer is. So printer manages colors is this first option right here, and it's usually your safest bet. So Photoshop is basically handing off responsibility of the conversion to your printer driver. So whatever is running your own personal printer or the one at school. Results are usually good. Photoshop manages colors is another option. This one lets Photoshop apply the color conversion, but you have to choose an appropriate printer profile. And I'm not sure how you feel about finding the appropriate one in here, but I think this makes us a little bit more nervous here. Many inkjet printers have profiles to match specific paper, and you would want to then read into that and see what they're recommending you use. So I'm definitely changing back to letting my printer do the work. Another option that we don't even see right here, because this is an RGB file, you can see over here, separations are actually grayed out. If this were a CMYK file, separations is when you could actually have it print the cyan plate, the yellow, the magenta, and the black, all of the different 4 separations. Not typically something you're doing in Photoshop or even especially at home. So we'll stick with that. All right, the next one we have normal printing and hard proofing. So normal is for normal. The rendering intent, this part that we have here, we have perceptual, saturation, relative, and absolute colorimetric. The most natural looking is perceptual. So if you're working with normal, the default is going to be perceptual. And luckily when you hover, you get a little description down here that lights up. So you can read those. Colors as perceived by the human eye. Hard proofing, this one, this one does its best to simulate results from a different printer. So once you do it, you have to select the appropriate profile. So do you want to look at it from a custom setup? And this is getting way deeper. I shouldn't have done that. Yeah, this is where you actually set up what kind of a device you're simulating. So maybe you know you're printing to something US Newsprint Snap 2007. If you were to choose that profile, it's going to give you something on your own computer that best replicates what this would look like. So hard proofing you might do if you're working on the job like in an agency and you want to see, give your client a hard proof of something that'll be printed elsewhere. But for most of us, we're just going to be normal printing in perceptual mode. The position and size, by default, it's always going to be centered on the piece of paper. So if it can fit, this is an 8 by 10 image that is easily centered on an 8.5 by 11. You can choose to not have it centered and tell it, you know, where from the top and where from the left to be positioned. The scale, it's going to print at 100%. This is actually evidently a 9 by almost 7-inch print. Scale to media, I've pointed out to some of you, sometimes your print is just a little bit too big and it has to put a little bit of a buffer zone here because on inkjets we can't print edge to edge. So if your image should have printed a whole 8.5 by 11, it's automatically going to smush it down a little bit, but it might not do it proportionately. So if you say scale to fit image, it will proportionately make it smaller to best print without a bleed. However, if it's smaller than the paper and we say scale to fit, it got bigger, and that's usually not what you want to do. So it's typically if your image is too big and you want to scale it down so that it prints well on the sheet of paper that you have. Some other things that we have are printing marks. If you twirl that open, we can ask for corner crop marks. So you see it put on these lines, and that tells us where we would line up our cutter to cut right down here. Obviously, this is not a bleed. It's cutting on the exact edge. So if your cut was off by 1/8 of an inch, you're going to have white showing. We have center crop marks. You can see some more things have shown up here. Registration. That's where the 4 colored plates would be locked down, those circles, so that they all print in the same spot. Description usually gives you the name of the file somewhere. I'm surprised it doesn't say Navy Girl somewhere. Oh, there's labels. It came here, Navy Girl JPEG. So if you wanted any of these printing, you could turn these on or off. So I'm just going to turn them all off for now. Functions you're very rarely going to use, but let's just take a peek. Emulsion down and negative options are for printing to devices that create actual film. So you're going to process film. The 3 buttons below give us some more options. So emulsion down, notice it's flipping it for one thing. And then a negative literally prints out a negative. And then you have a background. If you click on this, the color picker is going to open and you can choose a matte for your image. Just going to hit cancel. Border would allow you to put a border of a certain amount of millimeters or another measurement around. And bleed lets you move your crop marks in by a given amount. So if we were to say neither one of these, but just bleed and do 0.125 inches, okay. Oh, then we probably have to turn on our corner crop marks. Yep, now they're in just a little bit. If you see that right there, they moved in. All right, I'm just going to say cancel. I don't want to do any of those, but that's your print dialog. So kind of practice with your own options and see what you have with your own personal printer.